Hello. I want to welcome everyone to the 2021 National Watercolor Society's member exhibition virtual opening. I am the NWS president, Denise Boer. The artists chosen by Juror Matt Barber Kennedy include long-standing and brand new members from 7 countries and 33 states. It is my pleasure to introduce celebrated artist, professor, and juror Matt Barber Kennedy, who worked hard choosing the art for this exhibition. Matt, can you tell us about your process for choosing the exhibition?
I can. Hello, Denise. Hello, everybody. Um, well, first of all, let me just say it was a terrific honor to be asked to jury this exhibition for the National Watercolor Society. A huge honor for me. And it was a task that I wanted to do very well, of course, and I gave myself fully to it. So I hope you like what I've done. So my goal was to curate. I had 1,000 paintings, 1,000 submissions to look at, and my goal was to try and curate something like 100 of those paintings to create an exhibition that had a couple of things as common denominators. One, of course, is what you can do with water-based media, but that was a given because that's the self-selection of the application process. But more meaningfully, I really wanted to create an exhibition of paintings that were excellent as paintings, regardless of the fact that they are achieved using water-based media. They met certain standards for excellence that I have come to rely upon after 30 years of painting and half of that time teaching as a professor of art. And I'll go on to explain a little bit about what those standards encompass in a moment. I also wanted to make sure that this exhibition was not about my taste. It's an exhibition that covers, I think, all of the major genres. Certainly, I wanted to make sure that there was space in this exhibition for still life, for florals, for rural landscape and urban landscape, portraiture and figure, for narrative and illustrative work, and for non-representational work. And I think we've got excellent examples of all of those genres in this show. It was a process that took a very long time, and I want to thank the board of the National Watercolor Society for giving me the time to do this job thoroughly. I had the time to really live with these paintings and let them soak in, come back at them again and again, daily and towards the end, hourly, and really be sure that the voice of the painting was to my best abilities heard. I really had a chance to hear from even the quiet paintings, which in a shorter frame of time I wouldn't have been allowed to do. So I want to thank the board for giving me that chance. So what am I looking for in these paintings? As paintings, I'm looking for certainly excellence in design, which is not just composition. It's the arraignment of colors, the choice of colors, the juxtaposition of colors and tones, light against dark, primary against secondary. It's the way that the language of painting is arrayed upon the page, and of course composition. I'm looking at technical ability, but not for its own sake. I'm looking for an authentic ownership of technique. That can be loose and spontaneous, but it's owned by the artist and it's authentic. I'm looking for an understanding of the media, of course, but beyond the watercolor, the gouache, the ink, the acrylic, an understanding and a sensitivity to the substrate. And there's a variety of substrates that are in common use now, and really owning that choice also. And then the vision of the artist, the voice of the artist coming through through the use of imagery, something to say, some personality of the artist, and then drawing, where the battlefield where battles are won and lost, drawing is important, even if it doesn't involve a pencil. That commitment to drawing is something that speaks volumes to me. And those are the main parameters that I was looking for.
That sounds great, Matt. That was a great explanation. Thanks. On behalf of the National Watercolor Society Board of Directors, it is my great pleasure to present the 2021 Members Exhibition. You are in for such a treat to listen to Matt Barber Kennedy's commentary on all these exceptional paintings. And now, Matt Barber Kennedy is going to give you his fascinating commentary on the work that he chose.
Well, thank you very much. And before we get started, please let me apologize. If I butcher your name, I am so sorry. I'm only just becoming familiar with who did these paintings, and it's my bad if I mispronounce. I'm so sorry. So Edward Abrams, his painting Bradbury Building, what a triumph of draftsmanship. But what's remarkable to me is the decision making. He's taking it all the way to the back with his fabulous draftsmanship. But back there, it's not too showy. It's laid back in the space, and it's not demanding our attention. Where you and I will get bored, he's he's still going strong. Tremendous amount of patience and excellence in draftsmanship. Ingrid Albrecht, Plaza Shadows. A fabulous piece of courageous design in this painting, to give away 4/5 of the painting to almost white paper. And yet it's populated with these little characters which provide movement and dance. Obviously, literally movement, it's walking figures, but as our eye dances across the page, and then those strong diagonals top and bottom, just a super piece of design. The winner of the George Gibson Past President Award, Yinghao Bao, this painting floored me. It floored me. The light coming through from the top left is just extraordinary. The reflection of the sky in the water is extraordinary. But that inclusion of the sliver of brightness in the top of the frame is such a relief to the painting, which has this strong left to right horizontal, but that little diagonal of bright at the top there really makes the thing come alive. Amazing piece of painting. Angela Barbie, this is watercolor doing what only watercolor or ink can do. It's just letting the water do what it needs to do and transport the pigment. Get in, get out, and leave it alone. Just wonderful and so hard to do well. Fantastic pigment, a joyful painting. Diane Benoit Jamiefield. This is just gorgeous draftsmanship. And the concentration of detail, just enough on those edges around the glasses, just enough on the edges around the hand, nothing too fussy. Look at that ochre in the cuff as a sort of refrain of the ochre in the background, and into the beard. It's just so beautifully done and so simple. As a Brit, of course, this struck me as immediately familiar. Something on the Cornish coast, Mark Bird's 4th Street, Port Isaac, Cornwall. And a lovely piece of layered architecture, great detail. But look at that texture in the foreground, those deep, rich dark, that mossy age in the near roofs right in the front, holding up the entire painting. Just gorgeous. Matthew Bird, Magnolia Still Life. How can you not include a painting such as this in a juried exhibition of watercolor? A magnificent triumph of technique, so assured, so solid that you could reach out and touch those things. Look at that cold condensation in the middle, separating itself from the steel behind. Really nice. Denny Bond's Tension is a piece of personification that speaks to me. The ganging up of these objects on the left against the glass object, which almost seems to be leaning away in retreat. There's a real persecution going on there, an examination, witty but materially very, very astute. We really know what all of those things are made of. Joan Bareita's Blue Winter is a gorgeous painting. I'm not sure if it's on plein air. It certainly feels as though it is. Those trees are, there could be nothing but trees, but they're so stylistically done, so beautifully done. Layered tree upon tree upon tree. And then these escapes into the white sky at the back, which really takes our eye from the bottom along the river and up to the top edge of the painting. Super. Sharon Boyle's Beautiful Swimmer, it's a crab, but it's on Yupo, and Yupo is something that a lot of us love to work on because you get delightfully unexpected results. But there is no excuse and no laziness here. This is someone who really understands Yupo and has reined it in and used it to full effect. I just think this is masterfully done and really understanding what Yupo brings to the equation. Gorgeous. Karen Fletcher Braverman's String Theory Particles is it's as funny now as it was when I first saw it. I really enjoy this piece. One of the things that I think painting can do is it can seem a little certain of itself. I love the idea that we don't really know what is going on here in this painting. It leaves more questions to be answered than tells us what's going on. Also, the quality of that background. I always tell my students, try and avoid doing black backgrounds because they're really hard to do well. That's a magnificent piece of painting. Will Bullis's Emperor of the Moon, 3 paintings in one for me. This is 3 very, very different spaces. We've got the abstracted cogs in the background forming the universe. We've got that gorgeous texture in the moon's surface, and then a very, very assured and simplified character in the front. Look at that black and white, those stark contrasts, and then all the detail around the gun and the face and that fabulous pith helmet. Just super, super. Susie Birch's Fresh from the Sea is familiar to us all if we've ever looked at Winslow Homer. This is watercolor doing what watercolor does best. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely piece of fresh portraiture, really nicely done. Look at those horizontals striping across the painting left to right. Very simple and unfussy. And then we focus on the fabulous contrasts between the skin and the shirt. White's handled really well here. Helen Burkett's Sun and Shadow 3. Finding pattern in the landscape, finding pattern and showing it to us anew is a wonderful skill. There's so much to look at here. It's very simple. We know exactly what it is, but there is a joy in the shape making and the shadow play and the changes of scale front to back. Really, really super. Very inventive. Ken Cole has a unique application style, and I think there's something quite delicious about this pink-green color combo that is so surprising. Pink, green, and purples. Very, very surprising. Very unique application of paint. Delicate, beautiful, simple in the background. Just leave it all alone and really focusing on that intricate portrait. Speaking of intricate, Stuart M. Cantor's Hidden Window. And there is indeed a window hiding behind all of that stuff. This dance is a really nice dance in between. You could almost reach out and touch it. That stonework, that gritty stone, but also the flatness. It's the leaves almost reverting to a flat graphic design. It's a in-out kind of painting. At one point, it feels very spatial, and then it becomes a celebration of pattern, almost like a textile. You could lose yourself in here. Exquisite taste, beautiful colors. Ginger Chen's shopping again. Well, I am in awe. As an architectural painter, I've spent a long time over the years painting bricks. Those are some cracking bricks in there in the foreground. This is a painting of a dog, but it's a dog in space, and it's a dog waiting. And we know it's waiting not just because of the look, but because of the idea. The dog sitting on that hearth. And then the reduction of the painting into very simple tones in the back, allowing some lost edges in the back of the back portions of the dog. Really very clever. Diane Chencharik, passionate one. Edge control, my goodness. There's a lot of edges on that painting, and I've looked at it pretty hard. Those edges are so good. There are areas of watercolor doing wet in wet stuff here and there in the top, but it's so well controlled and so tastefully done. And I can imagine this going on and on forever. In fact, I kind of wish there was 48 of these side by side, each slightly different. Such a rich language. Jacqueline Clark's Close the Door. Personality, I think I talked about that in the very beginning. This is someone with a unique vision and a unique voice. It treads a delicious edge between childlike illustration and absolutely spatial depiction. It's flattened space, the floor's tipped up, everything's wonky, but that seems to me like a real space. In my mind, that's a real space. Beautifully done. Lee Culver's Still Standing, Hydrangea Cathedral. I didn't know the title of this when I drew it in, but I love the title. It is so lofty, these tall stalks leading up to where all the action is, and then the choice to let the action go off the top of the page so that it really raises our eye as if to the heavens. Gorgeous reduced color palette. The greens and then those blue greens on the back sides of some of those leaves. Delicious. Elaine Daly Birnbaum's The Shapes Things Take. So I really admire any composition that is undertaken in a square and keeps my attention moving. Squares are very hard to work with. And I think this is a super piece of design work. I love the fact that your eye keeps moving, never finds a place to settle. There's a combination of lines taking us around and then shapes and angles pulling us, to me, clockwise around the painting. It has a nightly, nocturne kind of eeriness to it. We're not quite sure what anything is, but I think everything's in just the right place. Gwyn Walker de Pilla's Made with Love, and I think this was painted with love. There is a commitment to every surface in this painting. That's a really nicely drawn spiral of the electrical filament in that heating plate. But the sense of what things are made of, and then the design and using those handles to really dynamically pull ourselves out from the circle to the edge of the painting and then back down again along the diagonal of the back of the cooker. Really nice. Christine Duke, Underworld. It was Mies van der Rohe, the architect, who said, less is more. And I believe that sometimes more is more. And this is one of those paintings where you just could lose yourself, finding new places to investigate, finding new places to dwell, finding new routes through the painting. There is so much going on here, and this is a very fertile mind. I want to see more of this stuff. Margaret Dwyer's Inner Circus. Well, the circus, of course, is a place of entertainment, and this is so joyful. Obviously derived from jellyfish and organic shapes, but there's so much invention going on in here, such a celebration of color. Colors put together that are very courageous, seamlessly merging one to another. Super. Kelly Eddington, Painting You into Existence. Of course, the relationship between the subject, the painter in the painting, and the painting that they are painting, there's a real connection and a moment going on here. But look beyond that narrative and look at the love and the attention that is paid to every inch of this painting. Look at that mug, look at the brushes. So much love and ownership of this painting. Everything's important. Stephen Edwards' Noon at the Oasis. This is an extraordinarily courageous and clever piece of painting. What a unique vision, what an inventiveness to make something so familiar seem so unfamiliar, and such a celebration. So much going on in this thing. There's ellipses all over the place, more ellipses than you and I could count. A very, very interesting and challenging piece of painting, beautifully done. Catherine Eng Coachella Palms. I think this is on plein air. It feels like it's done on plein air. This is reductive painting, which seems to the casual viewer so simple. And those of us who've spent time painting, which is probably everybody who's watching, you'll know how hard it is to do the simple things, to make things look simple. This is absolutely divine. The reduction of this massive space into simple washes that read so clearly. Excellent. Andy Evanson, Reading in the Tent. Well, if you've ever tried to paint a nocturne in watercolor, you know how hard nocturnes are. The management of tones, it's hard enough during the day. Very hard to manage your tones and your edges and your language in a dimly lit painting. Of course, our eye keeps going to the tent where the reading is going on, but there's so much beauty in those two trees, the lost and found edges, their presence against the sky, and the way they merge into the background as they come down towards the ground. So good. Zhengfeng, Snowy Creek. This is one of those paintings where the artist's hand is undeniable. It's a relationship between an artist and watercolor. The watercolor is doing its own thing, but under the very heavy guidance and experience of an artist who really understands the medium. So much intensity in that knitting of boughs and twigs, beautifully rendered, and then so much of the painting left alone. That messy sky in the background, lively, but sitting way in the back and not taking over. Paula Fiebig, Reaching Out. The dynamism in this painting, flower paintings can sometimes feel so static. The movement of this, whether it's in wind or underwater, the movement, the curl of those leaves, the lean of the blooms, it's full of dynamism. And then that gorgeous abstracted language for the water, the lines, the bubbles, the gradation from dark to light, so cleverly done. Amalia Fish, Reflection. So this reminds me so much of the prairie school architecture, which is prevalent here in Oak Park in Chicago, in Illinois. There's an architectural reference here for sure, and yet it's a landscape, and it's natural forms, which of course is one of the preoccupations of prairie school architecture, the relationship between architecture and the landscapes. We've got these natural forms and we've got this geometry, and the two things are working against and with each other so beautifully. It's just a gorgeous marrying of two languages. Francesco Fontana's Early Breakfast with Jet Lag. When we look at a portrait, we have to look at the face. The face, we always go to the face. It's what we learn to do as babies. And here we see someone stuffing a bunch of food in their mouth. Not your normal fare for an attractive portrait. Beautifully done. But look at the relationship of the figure to the table. This is where the magic really happens. The shadow play of the hands, the contact between the hand, the elbow, the table, leaving things alone, letting the table become a lost edge that turns into a background. It's absolutely masterful painting. Dennis Garrison's The Debater, another portrait. Really, of course, we focus again on the face. We look at those hazel eyes, but look how this is like three paintings in one. Drop below the chin. Look how that fabric, the jacket particularly, almost becomes like a flat graphic. Very, very simple. Good draftsmanship, very clean, very simple, letting the figure jump out and speak to us. And then in the background, we really have a very much an abstracted space. We have a suggestion of a room and perhaps a painting on the wall, but they're soft edged against the hard edge of the figure. It's very, very mature, clever thinking. Stephanie Goldman, Broken, from the What is Life series. This is strong. This is powerful, isn't it? There's a real twist in that figure, pain in that figure. That's a difficult pose. That's a turned pose, and then the face itself calling out, crying out. This is a portrait that means something. This has got some real tension to it, and it's moving. She grows a portrait of Boston fern. This seems cinematic to me. The relationship, the conversation, if you will, between the fern and this sphere in the foreground, that's what we're asked to focus on. That's what the director, Shiguo, is pulling into focus and really making quite tender the arc of the fern to enclose and reflect that circular sphere. And yet, in the background, there's all this depth, which he leaves alone with this blurred depth of field. It's very, very well created. Glenda S. Haas, Venetian graffiti. I do love symmetry and asymmetry. Here we have something that's very symmetrical, and yet not, because of course the graffiti throws it all off into asymmetry. And then you have the secondary graphics, which are the city graphics, 2225, the address of the building, again throwing us into asymmetry. And then beyond that, the symmetry of those windows, but they're not symmetrical because you can never do things quite the same. If it's mass produced, you can, but these are handcrafted ironmongery grills, and they're not quite the same. There's a lovely, lovely attention to surface, but also the asymmetry in this thing creates real interest for us. Richard Hanson is winner of the Lee Blair Past President Award for his piece Can't Always Hunt into the Wind street series. I was sort of speechless when I saw it. It can't go wrong with red, by the way. Red's a great color, and that's a gorgeous red on that wall. But look at how much population there is in this painting. Everything is loved, everything is cared for, everything is given great attention. That messy wiring, the stuff that's plugged in, the electrics, the posters, everything is treated as though it counts and as if Richard's life depends upon it. It's such a committed piece of painting and of course technically brilliant, but beautiful. James Hartel, Inner Child, craves pizza and custard. This is joy. This is a joyful piece. It speaks to the 50s. It speaks to a now faded past. The days of drive-ins, the days when a child was quite happy with a pistol and a holster and a diaper, apparently. It's a lovely, lovely piece. So joyful, gorgeous colors. Graphic, interesting. Tracy Hebert, Sticks and Stones. Don't you just want to reach down and pick that kid up? The relationship here between the viewer and the child it pulls at your heartstrings. It's such an intimate relationship, and it's all in those eyes, staring up at us in love and in need and in trust. It's so clever. And then this circle of of stonework around. We don't really need to get too lost in it. It's there, it's rich, it's specific, but it doesn't come near us. That face is what's coming right up into our arms. That's a beautiful, beautiful piece. It tugs at the heartstrings of any parent, I'm sure. Xiao Xinghu, On the Way to School. Great, great. Look, there's 4 people on the way to school, and they're all doing something different with their face. What I cannot fathom is how I know exactly what the nearest figure, the one with the head turned 4/5 of the way outside of our view. I know exactly what they're doing. They're smiling and they're about to break into a laugh. It's so beautifully captured just through the bulge of the cheek and that light on the chin. It's so well done. I also really like the golden ratio that's going on here in this painting. It's nicely divided, very nicely paced, tremendous attention to surface. Han in Huang Wang, The Seagulls. And there it is, it's a painting of seagulls, but it's more than that. So yes, it is a painting of 2 seagulls, but this is a painting that has a real A-B quality to it, a real play on 2 different kinds of languages. We've got the main characters, we've got our birds, beautifully painted. And then we've got the violence of the sea behind, painted in a very, very fresh way. And then the geometry of those 2 birds. They almost don't need to be birds at all. These angular shapes against that movement in the sea. Those hard edges against that looseness and that dynamism in the sea. A fantastic set of A-B ideas. Gene Highland, Golden Days. It takes an artist sometimes to show us the familiar and have us see it anew. And I feel like these things are have been passed by 1,000 times, and suddenly Gene has made them film stars. The color is absolutely celebratory. Gorgeous, gorgeous, rich color associated with these things that are humble and rusty and static and unposed and have been there forever. And yet they have become, for a moment, stars of their own little movie. And that's a beautiful piece of humility. Elwyn Joseph's Still Sailing. There is not a thing in here that Elwyn hasn't owned. All the way from the that green bucket in the bottom, all the way back to the red tug or red yacht at the top. Every moment is addressed. Every surface is addressed. But look at the work that receding sail does. That receding boom arm with the sail. It takes us through the painting from near to far. It takes us from this mast on the right, which truncates the painting and holds it in. That piece of cropping on the right is very, very essential, beautiful, and then takes us back to the wheelhouse. Very, very beautifully done. Bev Joswiak's Circle Games, another figure piece showing how beautifully the figure is set into an abstracted space. We had this before in another piece. That background is almost a completely abstract celebration of color and texture and line and movement. It's poetic, it's balletic. And then we have the figure herself wrapped up in this complex knot. And the tutu kind of sprawling across the painting, almost exploding off to the right-hand side. I see little marks moving off, almost like scratches moving off from the hip to the right-hand side of the page. Very, very beautiful. Speaking of marks exploding, Kathy Kitz's Struggle Within. At first blush, perhaps an abstract, non-representational piece, and yet there's enough information here for this to feel grounded and to feel familiar and to feel like a rural landscape. There's these telegraph wires, telegraph poles rising from the horizon line, the flattened space of the ground approaching us, given just enough information to feel textural, perhaps plowed field, but it's not fussy, and it's not allowed to become too much a painting of space. These diagonals right in the middle of the page remind us that this is an artist at work. The artist's hand is in there. The action of the artist, mark making, absolutely exquisite. Shirley R. Klepp's Café del Borgo. Well, it's a painting that is what it is. It's a bike, and it's a stool, and it's a poster, and it's a window. But it's a celebration of geometry and color. The repetition of the circles, those strong circles, both in the wheels and an oblique angle in the stools, and then again in the painting, and then set against the squares of the gridded window, and then those horizontals banding across the painting. It's a wonderful dance. You could almost take away the objects altogether and just have this as an abstracted space. And then look at that empty space, which occupies fully a third of the painting up there, top right. Just lovely pacing. Alkaline Spots, a portrait. What a handsome dog. But draftsmanship, the presence of the line work, the importance of the line work, both in terms of edge as with a paintbrush, but also the existence of those pencil lines, owning that right from the get-go, knowing what matters, what kinds of lines need to be drawn, very lively. And then that nose right in the middle, my goodness, I could reach out and touch it. It's loose, and yet it's very, very precise where it counts. Jason Knapp is the recipient of the Phil Paradise Past President Award for his piece, Tug Fender, which I like for so many reasons, and some of them are very obvious. Again, red. I'm only just noticing that red seems to appeal to me. But obviously, it's a well-executed painting which describes surface incredibly well. But the use of the circle as a motif in this painting and the awareness of it is a real treasure to me when I look at this painting and keep coming back and discovering more. That's a painting that I think is incredibly successful and generous, because there's always more to find. There are countless circles and portions of circles in this painting, and I have to say that justifies the painting alone. Frank Coran's Harlem Over Third. Watercolor has a reputation for being incredibly difficult, and to me, this is one of the hardest things to do. This feels like a moment in time. It feels like it's on plein air. It feels like it is recording a moment. And the thing that mattered in this moment was the light and the shadow. And so that's been used to orchestrate the painting. It's so hard to not have your idea hijacked. And what I really like about what Frank's done here is he doesn't get specific. You have to believe there's an awful lot of specificity that was in front of his eye when he was looking at this thing, but nothing is allowed to take over. It's about the light and shade in that space, in that view. Stephen Kuhlman's Louisville Iron 2. Golly. Well, I'm a big fan of architecture. I'm a big fan of rusty architecture, and I've sort of made that my career. This is an exquisite piece of draftsmanship. Limited palette painting it's hard to do well. The rhythm in this thing carries the painting, and so this suppressed limited palette is just enough. Just a super dance, but then that oomph top left, without which the painting would feel wouldn't feel insipid, but it needs that oomph top left, and that's just a gorgeous piece of decision making. Carmen Lagos, Brisa Imar, sorry about the pronunciation. So this is on one hand a floral painting. It's some leaves, but to me this is geometry, and to me this is pattern. This is putting color against color. This is putting diagonal against diagonal. It's about pacing. Look at the stripes in the sea rising from green up through to the violet. Look at the stripes, of course, in the main leaf on the left, but look at that curve, that subtle curve in the spine of the left curve, that rich green, and how that mediates the painting and addresses the left border of the painting with that tiny triangle of blue see-through. It's such a clever piece of rhythm. That's where this succeeds for me. Beautiful rhythm. Francis Lee, Journey to the East. This just entertains me. It's such a funny painting. I love these cattle. They are laid straight across the middle of the page, but you don't get a sense of this thing being static because the sort of symmetry of the slopes of the near left and the right slopes are offset because of the use of value. And then the static nature of the herd in the middle of the painting is completely offset because our eye is drawn past them and across this winding road that takes us from near to far. And that is so clever, without which it would have not worked as a painting, but it works so beautifully, very well understood. Richard Lewis, Eye to Eye. Well, by now, some of you may have worked out I'm English, and so there's obviously something of appeal here for me. It's an Aston Martin British racing car and a British Bulldog, but that's not why it's in the show. Fabulous choices in this painting. The character of that car, again, personification. The car has its face, and the car has its expression, and the dog has its face and its expression, and this conversation is important. What happens on the road is reduced just to a glorious texture, and we don't get carried away. What happens in the background is reduced to tertiary information, really sitting back there so that we can focus on what the artist wants us to see. Nick Long, Soul Survivor. Color theory, people, and contrast. It's all going on here. Red, it does command a lot of, you get a big bang for your buck out of a bit of red. That is beautifully located. But the quality of the paint, I can feel the temperature of that water. It's so wet. The lean on that yellow, without which the thing would have been very static. There's so much movement in this painting, so simple in terms of its content, so complex in terms of its paint application. Beautifully done. Carolyn Lord is the winner of the Chris Van Winkle Past President Award for her piece La Plage I'm not even going to try that. So this is another piece of very personal language. The application of paint here is so inventive and so beautifully done. The color combinations are fabulous. This treads an interesting line between big space from near to far, the horizon lost in the distance, big space and flattened space. It becomes, in some sense, an arrangement of shapes in a rectangle, avoiding the temptation to resolve this thing with any detail in the foreground, keeping our tonal language right there in the same area all the way across the painting, and then having us concentrate on those beautiful striations, that sort of limestone sedimentary rock in the cliff. Just gorgeous. Mick McAndrews, Winter Solstice. So white is a hard thing to paint. Snow, consequently, is a hard thing to paint. I avoid it like the plague. The temptation here would be to put in an awful lot of detail in those trees because there's so much white in this painting. But the trees are really, really reduced to beautifully characterized shapes. Not a whole bunch of tonal range going on, not a lot of information because Look at what's going on in the far slopes of the mountains behind. Look how simply, by contrast, the near ground is treated. The snowy foreground is treated. And then there's a very simple piece of architecture. So hard to do, my goodness. And McCartney under the Kigelia tree. Again, I've never seen people put paint down like this before. A very personal application of paint. But the rhythm of this painting, it seems to me to conform to or suggest or work upon the golden section again. The rhythm of this painting, taking our eye across the bottom, up the main trunk, swooping over to the left, and then coming back down, and then those horizontal lines in the sky in the far distance, taking us back again to whatever it is that's happening under the Kigelia tree. And we don't know what's happening under the Kigelia tree, and has left us to decide that. But that's where our eye keeps going. It's a fabulous piece of circular composition. Dan McCrary's The Chain Gang, so much kinetic energy in these cars, which of course once were moving things all about kinetic energy, and now they're a rusting pile. Yet that kinetic energy is in there because of the Dutch angle. And we see this a lot in illustration. We tend not to see it so much in fine art, and I really want to applaud Dan for knowing the power of that tilted axis, which really does set a static pile into motion again, gives them new life, and then fantastic materials and great color. Sabir Nazar's Dead Mannequins could so easily have been a dead painting were it not for the fabulous looking and seeing that's going on here, when an artist can see and arrange a painting to capitalize on something. Those eyes, the hair, the interest, all the way in the back of the painting sets up a real dynamism between the back and the foreground, which is dominated by that deep, dark space in the torso of the nearest mannequin. So our eye is moving through and around this pile of broken figures and never stays still. And then we don't need to get fussy in the foreground. The foreground just peters out and lets us approach that pile without impediment. We don't get caught up on our way to the mannequins. Very clever. James Nutt, well-used pencil. Big fan of the humble. I'm a big fan of the humble and finding joy in the everyday. This is a glorious celebration of something that we are also familiar with as artists. It's sort of, for many of us, it's our best friend, the humble pencil. Joyful, so full of life. And it is a well-used pencil because it's sharpened down to a nubbins. Lovely pencil work in this drawing of a pencil. Those lines are gorgeous. Tim Oliver's Eat Up Girls, Winter's Coming. And there, off to the right, are the girls. This could so easily have gotten sidetracked. We've got two opposing ideas here. We've got the heavily weighted avenue on the left, the path, the track, the big tree, and then we've got the rhythm and the repetition of the cows dotted around to the right of the fence. And then we've got this fence line taking us to the red truck. But look at the sensitivity with which that fence line, the right fence line specifically, look at the sensitivity with which that is painted. No two fence posts are allowed to be the same. Nothing is too dominant. There's light, there's let go, you put it in, you leave it off. There's so much rhythm in each of those posts. Fantastic. Febang Pai's Pamir Child. Here, the ownership of the brushwork is extraordinary. This is the painter's hand for sure. We are. I feel like I'm in it with the artist here. Of course, we want to get into the face, and the face is done so beautifully, and the nuance in those fingers as the hand is held back against the side of the head. slight change. Oh, it's beautiful. But look at that brushwork. Look at that commitment to painting. This is a painting. This feels like the artist loves painting. So much energy. Luis F. Perez's Privileged Food 2. How many times must we look at a bowl of fruit? Oh my goodness, I've never seen a bowl of fruit this way before. Trying to find something new to say about something so familiar is a real struggle. And this is a unique painting. The way it's laid into the page is, of course, unique and surprising. And the fruit looks very much like fruit. It's beautifully done. But look at the space between the pieces of fruit. Look at the spaces between. That is incredible. The space between things is so important. And it's captured here as well as the surface so very well. And a great piece of composition. Very fresh. George Politis, Door in Mezzovo. It is a door, but of course it might just as easily not be a door. The abstract composition of diagonals, verticals, and horizontals is a joy, an absolute joy. Bit of dry brush going on in here. Love to see a bit of dry brush going on. This is an artist who's really pushing watercolor, using what he knows about watercolor, wet in wet, dry brush, hard edge, soft edge, great commitment to dark shadows, really good drawing, and a fantastic piece of composition. Deborah Ponder, Skyrider. White fences. White fences are hard to do. White fences are hard to do and to do with any kind of interest. And the liveliness of this fence is not only in the way the fence is painted, but in the way that the fence relates to the sky, the cloud shapes behind, and the bicycle. So we have really complex geometry. This is a very complex piece of drawing, very complex relationships of shapes. And then the release as this curving fence top merges into the lively and beautifully painted sky. It's a painting that's both about stillness, but also about movement. Very exciting. Scott Ponimone, Dan and Jan. We are, as you all know, in a very unusual time. This is a time that we will all remember, I am sure. And this painting captures that. Of course, it's the surfaces are beautifully painted. Of course, these are very well painted figures. But more than that, this painting seems to me to capture something of the spirit of our time. The banality of that plastic bag, the everydayness of that plastic bag seems to lend itself to the bizarreness of our day, this moment in time that we're looking at. It's a very arresting painting, one that I think will still mean something to us 50 years from now. Trish Poupard, Huntington Cactus. I have to applaud Trish here for doing a couple of things so incredibly well. The dynamism in this piece, the reach in this piece, these plants seem to be reaching upwards from bottom to top. So it's got a lot of movement, but look at the darks. The commitment to dark is, I think, quite unusual in a painting of flowers. This harsh light almost seems to be the star of the show, almost seems to be the subject. And then there's just enough going on across the top there with that dark, shadowy line sort of horizontally, a fraction down from the top, really holds our eye in and really completes and contains the composition, stops it escaping us. Very clever. David Poxon, On Brighton Beach. Again, this is one of those paintings where, yes, it's about architecture, but it's so much about geometry. These horizontals, this unrelenting horizontality moving across the page, the decision-making to square up square the shoulders, and address this beach, this pier, uh, straight on. The horizontality, and yet the introduction of those verticals, both in the struts holding up the pier, but significantly in that dancing ironmongery on the right-hand side. Just enough, beautifully designed, and the repetition of squares and rectangles throughout the piece. Very, very clever. Anita Venkati is the recipient of the Members Exhibition ScholARTship Award for Parade Steps. And this painting has me so intrigued. It's almost a painting of the parade ground. It is a painting of these two figures. They're not marching, they're walking because they're out of step. They have opposite leading legs. And there's also a relaxed attitude in the near figure because of the held gloves. One gets a sense there's a conversation going on. It's almost a painting. Yes, it's a painting of the parade ground. Yes, it's a painting of two figures. But it's almost a painting of the conversation between these two figures. Plus, I think to paint that much parade ground is brave, but to paint that much parade ground and maintain our interest, to find new things to say throughout the rectangle is a triumph. Lyrics, lone palm. There is the lone palm. It is a painting of a lone palm. But why is it so much about that lone palm? It's about the lone palm because of the space around the lone palm. And it's about the lone palm because of the way the lone palm hits the building, the crispness of the building, the crispness of the palm, the position of the palm, and its space around it gives it the importance it needs, and that's reflected in the title. But look at what Lee has chosen to do with half the painting. Very, very much left alone. Plenty going on in there. It's good to look at, but it doesn't get in our way. It doesn't hold us up. It doesn't stop us from approaching the barn. It's just a rich, soft entry into the painting, and then we get to the meat of the thing. This beautifully drawn and beautifully articulated barn and palm. J. Roberts, Standing Guard. Seeing things that are familiar and seeing them in a new way, seeing them for the beauty that they have, celebrating them, celebrating things we love. This is what we are called to do as artists sometimes. Again, almost like a movie, we have this depth of field thing, which I think heightens something of the aggression of the night in the foreground. We've got the rear troops, we've got the advancing troops. We have a sense of movement back to front. Very, very simply dealt with in the back, beautifully evoked in the front. Laura Robinson receives the John Salchak Past President Award for her piece Sparkling Blue, which is about all sorts of things. It's not really about those three characters so much as those three characters in a moment. And that moment is characterized by the spray, the wind, the coastal breeze, the hot light, might be cold light, but that bright light. That's what the painting's about. And the energy and the movement in the air is so present in this painting and could have been lost with more attention to things like faces. It's such a restrained piece of painting and such an ebullient piece of painting. Exuberant, that's the word. It's exuberant. Irina Roman, Ricky. This intrigues me as a set of decisions. It almost feels like three different paintings in collage. It's a very unusual vantage point. Where are we? Our eye is somewhere around hip level, maybe even lower than hip level to this figure. There is very compressed tonal language in that figure. Curious lighting, strong lighting, but a compressed tonal language. And then we get to the teepee behind, and it's like things become into focus and things suddenly step almost into Technicolor. We really see a lot more movement in the color and crisp, brittle snap in that fabric. And then if we can get over that strong diagonal of the supporting beam, then we get into this soft edge landscape, skyscape, where we don't even go to blue anymore. We're into green. So we're into a sort of fantasy. It's a very, very interesting way of seeing. One I think that we would have perhaps not got to in 100 years ago, before computers. I think there's something really beautiful about the distortion of color and space in this painting. John Salminen, Red Bag. There it is, the red bag. The red bag tucked in there to the left, in the hand of a near figure. So much going on. I believe this is New York. I believe this is probably Times Square, but it doesn't really matter. It's incredibly busy. So much going on. And yet our eye keeps coming back to that red bag, not because it's red. This would have worked if it were a different color bag. It's the arrangement of diagonals and the arrangement of curves and the arrangement of details that keeps bringing our eye back to that red bag. Just enough emptiness, just enough information in that massive surface of road. Look, that's fully a third of the painting is tarmac, but there's so much going on and it's so beautifully done that it's a release. It's an interesting release that allows us to really enjoy all that paraphernalia in the architecture and then keep zooming back to the red bag. A triumph. Thomas Schaller Road Home. You should never divide your paintings up the middle. We've all been told that, I'm sure. Even Thomas Schaller has been told that. However, if you really know what you're doing, you can divide your paintings up the middle. So what I want you to draw your attention to here is the incredibly clever use of the darks on the left and on the right. On the left, we've got those trees, which are a tremendous commitment to draftsmanship and dark paint. That's super. And then on the right, we've got these receding electrical pylons. And if they had more solidity, and if they had more oomph, and if they had more consistency, they would kill this painting, I think. But they are a dance. They catch the light. They're constructed, and we understand the construction, but they don't dominate, and they march us back into the painting alongside the road. And that's so clever, so clever. Anna Sharma is the recipient of the Donna Watson Past President Award for her painting Fish and Popcorn. And I want to tell you why I think this painting is so good. It looks just like a bird. But that's not at all why it is such a good painting in my esteem. There are subtle things going on here that are to do with rhythm and to do with the stuff of painting. The bird is cropped. It's a painting of a bird, and yet we've missed out one of the most interesting parts of the bird, which is the tail. That in itself is a very courageous decision. Look at the shadow of the bird and how that engages the left-hand side of the painting and how that creates some tension in the way it passes over the foot. That's interesting stuff. Look at the reflection of the shape of the white portion of the bird in those popcorn pieces and the shells, a refrain, as it were. So we have this double triangle. It's an X, as it were, of white coming up from the bottom to the gull's beak and then expanding out to his shoulders. And then look at the love in the top right, which is not negative space. It's positively contributing in a quiet way. We absolutely understand what these surfaces are, but we're not getting too fussy. It's so nicely done, so simple, so so reductive and so hard. Well, talking of hard, David Stickel's Lady of Catalana, Barcelona. What a piece of draftsmanship. And again, dividing the painting right up the middle, which you should never do unless you really, really understand what you're going to do. The diagonals in this painting, countering the central axis, are really important. Those diagonals in the sculpture on the corner of the building, present us with the outstretched arms and the planted flag as opposing diagonals, and they're so important to the success of this painting. And then the symmetry asymmetry thing. We are looking at two sides, and yet they are slightly different. Well, they're very different, in fact. And then the release as we get above the parapet and up into the sky, just enough movement in those clouds and enough commitment to the design of those clouds to really contain and complete the painting. And amazing draftsmanship. Ron Stock's The Hat Shop is just one of those examples of how hard it is to do watercolor the way it's meant to be done. This to me feels like watercolor the way I learned watercolor was meant to be done when I first started painting. It's done with such a surety. Is that the right word? Is that a real word, in fact? It's done with such confidence and such understanding of the medium. There's so much looseness in some of this stuff. Those hat bands, some of them are just dry brush stroke. The one on the right, for example. Look at the red stripe on the hat halfway up on the left. And that hint of light on the very edge of the brim of the hat halfway up on the left. So clever, so beautifully done, and so hard to do well without getting into overpainting. Dashwai Sun, My Voice from Underground. Paintings don't have to provide us with all the answers, and paintings that allow us enough space to enter in are paintings that I enjoy particularly. I really, really want to know what's going on here, and I have to provide my own narrative. I'm given enough information to know what all these things are. Not quite enough information to be able to understand it all in the cold light of day. It's almost like a dreamscape. And I need to unpack it. I want to unpack it. What are these sprightly birds doing? They're like sprites. Are they good? Are they benign presences? There's something going on here, and it's a joy to sit and wonder. Zhu Tianya, Praying. Well, of course, it's a very good portrait. Of course, it's a very good portrait. We believe that is a face. We believe those cheekbones. Look at that. Marvelous. Look at the hair. Wonderful. But, ladies and gentlemen, look at the fabric. That felt jacket is so lovingly painted. I feel those hems. I feel the way that thing is sewn together. It's so simply done. It's not simply done. It's done with such restraint, but such excellence. And then the stripe of trim, both on the cuff behind the beads, and as it loops its way around the neck and off to the left-hand side of the painting, that just livens this thing up so much. There's so much rhythm in those colors. A triumph. Carmela Tuliszewski, Stitch in Time. Still life. I would consider this a still life. So much going on in here. Oh my goodness. A real commitment to creating a personality. The personality of the seamstress. Even the tabletop is covered with the stuff of dressmaking. The commitment to light, the thoroughness, the ability to just stick at it and care about and love every surface and treat it as unique. Shiny things, dull things, small things, big things. Everything is loved and everything is done with exquisite beauty. Ceci Turner's Forest Overture. This is one of those quiet paintings that just struck me. There's something oppressive about the space, almost almost damp. I can almost feel the moisture in the air. We've got this rhythm of the verticals going up off the top of the page. So we know we're in big, deep space. We don't need to get into too much detail in the background. We know we're in a big, densely wooded area. We know there are rocks. But this movement of the water at a slight diagonal across the page and the verticals of those trees creates a stationary experience and a movement. I can almost hear the water, and I think it's not just because of the way the water is painted, it's because of the static nature of those trees and the moisture in the atmosphere. Talking of moisture, Lorraine Wattry's dueling pintails, 2 ducks having a good old time in the water. Actually, are they having a good time or are they arguing? I'm not sure. Mrs. Duck in the background seems to be staying out of it. Beautifully painted ducks. They are beautifully painted ducks. But look at that water. The color space in this painting is exquisite. There's just enough green in the faces, in the cheeks of those 2 male pintails to liven up that brown and to contrast with the russet tones of the grasses and the purples in the water. It's a gorgeous piece of color manipulation. It's so beautifully done. Catherine Weber, hillside tree, all sorts of knitting going on in there, and there are things hanging in that tree, and I want to know about them, and I want to know what that owl knows. There's so much intrigue in this, and to me it feels illustrative. It feels as though there's a story to be told, and it's for me to find that story and to make that story. It's a joyful piece. It's lively. It emanates out towards the corners, towards the edges, all from that central knot where the owl is. Nice radial design. Cindy Welch's Fat Boy. Of course, this is a chrome painting, but there's so much chrome here. I almost felt like treating it as a landscape. It's an unremittingly shiny piece of engine painting, and we see so many flashes of the greens and the ochres and the blues of the landscape, and we see the landscape readdressed again and again with different distortions, and I think that's so clever and so interesting. It really, to me, this is an interesting way to view landscape. Lynn Welker receives the Bernice Collins Turner Past President Award for her piece Northern Shore, a collage, mixed media celebration of what is it? It's these rocky spaces, this craggy, hard shoreline. It's a landscape, but it's an abstracted landscape which evokes rather than accurately describes. It's an evocation of a rocky piece of landscape. It's a beautiful thing to look at, and it's a square, and it's designed so well, so masterfully. You look at it for ages, and then you suddenly realize you're looking at a square. It's broken up into such gorgeous, contrasting larges and smalls, and then there's the artist's hand all over it. Fabulous. Frank Wengen's Real Farmers Need at Least Two. Ladies and gentlemen, look at this painting of 2 tractors, half of which has nothing to do with the tractors or the barn that the tractors were associated with. It's a beautifully divided rectangle. It's, I'm going to guess, approximately 2-1. I'm not sure what the relationship is, but there's all this deep space going on and on and on into the background. The sky beautifully takes us way, way, way into the background. And then we have the left to right horizontality of the fence line and the pathway supporting the weight of that beautifully painted barn. Great rhythm of the windows. And if you want a little experiment in difficulty, try doing some tractor tires. They are very hard to do. Gorgeous. Pam Wenger's Patience. A lovely portrait of a young lady. And I was immediately attracted to the way that the face is painted, the coloration in the face, very, very nice. But what really clinches this for me, what makes this so excellent, is what's happening below the knees. Specifically, it's where things touch, the ground. It's so exquisitely done. The way that the contact, the space, the relationship of the foot of the chair to the ground, the relationship of the foot, the Converse All-Star, to the ground and to each other, the touch of one thing to another is spectacular. And I keep going from toes to eyes, toes to eyes, toes to eyes. And then all this stuff in the background is just delightfully left alone. It's simple, it's evocative, but we don't need to get too fussy. That concentration on the things that really matter is spectacular. Daniela Wernick, The Black Letter and a White Canvas. I don't know how much time you guys have spent with these paintings. I've spent a lot of time with these paintings. There's an awful lot of narrative in this painting, which I'm not going to go through with you. I'm just going to invite you to look at it and think. This is a very clever piece of narrative painting. And yes, the face is beautifully painted. The surfaces are beautifully painted. The tiles are an exercise in patience and skill. But the layering of storytelling, the reflections of the window, what it means for the window to be at that angle, how you slowly can unpack what's going on in this room is very, very clever and rich. And I was grateful to have the chance to really get to know this piece. Susan Beth Wilhelm, Streaming Together. Two Canada geese, I think they're Canada geese, exquisitely painted, beautifully painted. My goodness, those are geese for sure. And then look what happens around them. The background is reduced to this lively and activated green space with a verticality going on. There are vertical moves in the paint here that contrast with the horizontal moves in the water. And that's a beautiful combination of watercolor moving left to right, but just graphic line, beautifully, exquisitely drawn line work in the water. There's a lovely pace and a very nice hierarchy in this painting. Jeff Williams, Rockin' Bass Rocks. So the title tells us about the rocks, but of course it's not about the rocks. The rocks are there to be crashed against. I can hear this. I can hear the motion of the wave on the rock. It's not even about the sea. It's about that impact and that spray. You can feel it in the air. You can feel the particles of water rising with each impact and moving into the air. You can almost see it in the quality of the paint in the rock. You can hear it. It's about the moment, about being there. Fabulous. Susie Wolf, Goodall Creek Cedar. All sorts of things going on in this painting. It is at once a hollowed out tree and it's a piece of sort of abstracted design work. The surface of the tree, it feels like a burnt out tree. It feels with those interior textures. It feels as though it's charred, burnt out, and yet it has this rich, rich rainbow of coloration moving seamlessly from pinks to greens. Beautiful. And then the outside of the tree enveloping that precious interior space with separate textures. And then the rest of the canvas left pure negative space, very stark. It's a graphic gesture. It's striking. Jian Wu is the recipient of the Milford Zorn's Past President Award for Tibetan Red, and as a portrait, of course, it's a striking portrait, but so painterly. There is a coloration in the skin that is a beautiful reprise of the colors in the right shoulder, the shoulder on the right. Great understanding of when to say when to let go, when to devolve into loose energy, We know enough about the material. We know enough about the beads. We know enough about everything to really have a very strong understanding of this form. Look at the hair, just enough information to have real character. But this is a painting, not a photograph. This is all about paint and the energy and the commitment and the passion of the painter. That background is just a joyful, some would say underpainting, but I mean it's making marks to an end so that that face really shines. Yanqi Zhai, blind Singer Amuti, receives the Barse Miller Past President Award. And of course, because we're doing this alphabetically, we're seeing two portraits receive two awards at the end. And I don't want you to be left with a feeling that I gave awards to portraits. It just so happens that alphabetically, these two are side by side. Very different painting, incredibly reductive color scheme. It's almost a split triad painting, maybe raw umber, burnt sienna, and indigo, or something like that. Very reduced color scheme. Look at he's changing brushes left, right, and center. The huge brush that's evident in the near shoulder. Tremendous control in the brushwork where it counts around the face. Great drawing just enough and not too much. Look at the delicacy of the brim of the hat, whether that's scratched into wet paper or we don't know. I don't know. But beautiful combination of loose paint and sharp line, tremendous character, and a great piece of watercolor. Lin Shu, New Year's Eve. This painting I kept coming back to again and again and again. Again, a square painting. My goodness. Dominated by two very animated figures in incredible costume. And before them, we have the foreground of these Christmas ornaments, beautifully decorated. So we've got tremendous draftsmanship and attention to detail and exquisite, one might say, reality. But they're not real things because look at the sort of plastic quality of the skin. They're almost too perfect, almost like waxworks. And then we step into the back portion. And for the back portion of the painting, it's almost like it becomes another space entirely, almost like a backdrop, almost like in a game, you have the environment of the game, and then you have the characters moving through that environment. It's almost like we have a backdrop, and then these characters brought in to the artificial world. Very interesting, very unique, and an exquisite piece of paint.
Matt, I wanted to thank you for your enlightening commentary. I was smiling. I was entranced and looking to see what you saw. It was a master class in the excellent design, drawing, voice, application of the medium on paper of this members exhibition for 2020 that you chose. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to you, pleasure working with you, and you are an inspiration to all of us.
Wow. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
All of this is only possible because of the National Watercolor Society's board of directors. They work very hard because they are passionate about water medium, and they're passionate about you, the members, and promoting the medium that they're passionate about, which is watercolor, and the society and the artist. And now these are the award winners with their artwork and their quotes. Congratulations to all the award winners and to all the artists in the exhibition. There was a huge response to our call for entry. So you all should be so honored for being chosen by Matt Barber Kennedy. Make sure that you go on to YouTube and watch the video of this exhibition at NWS Stream at YouTube. You can also see the exhibition at our online sales gallery at nwsexhibition.com. And you can visit us on our website if you had additional questions. We hope to see you in the gallery soon.